Richard Strauss, the German composer. Richard George Strauss had a lifetime of success as a composer, conductor, pianist, and violinist, and could be described as a leading composer of the late Romantic and early modern eras of the 20th century. He was greatly admired for his works and served as a source of inspiration to other musicians who looked up to him. Even though he had his ups and downs, Richard Strauss overcame his troubles and made history as one of the most talented musicians known across the world. But where did Richard's journey start, and how did he come into the limelight of music? Let's find out. Richard George Strauss was born on the 11th of June, 1864. He was the first of two children born to his parents, Franz Strauss and Josephine Schor. Richard's father, Franz, was a major horn player at the court opera in Munich and was also a professor at the Royal Music School. Franz Strauss was a celebrated horn virtuoso during his time and was so good he got the nickname Joachim of the Horn. Josephine, his mother, was the daughter of George Schor, who was a popular rich brewer from Munich. Richard was bred in the heart of Munich, and one thing was for sure: he was able to capitalize on everything the city had to offer with his musical talents. Richard started learning music at the young age of 4, the age when most children were learning how to properly spell their names. This just shows how exceptionally sharp Richard was as he began his piano studies with August Tombeau, the harpist of the Munich Court Orchestra. It didn't take long before Strauss was able to play the tunes in a book of operatic arrangements and beautifully tackled a Mozart sonata. Soon, Strauss began attending rehearsals at the orchestra and further took lessons in music theory and orchestration from the ensemble's assistant conductor. His teacher played him a great deal, and one particular trick struck Richard and encapsulated his mind completely. Whenever he played to Richard, his teacher usually played the bass line with the left hand, the middle part with the tip of his extremely long pointed nose, and the top line with the right fingers. These moves apparently amazed Richard during the time he was learning under August. At the age of 6, Richard wrote his first composition, the Schneider Polka for piano. But since he was not yet able to write down music, his father wrote this composition for him, and Richard continued to compose more songs throughout his lifetime. Once he clocked the age of 8 in 1872, Richard started taking violin lessons from his cousin, Benno Walter, at the Royal School of Music, and at 11 years, he started a 5-year compositional study with Friedrich Wilhelm Meyer. In 1874, Richard heard his first Wagner operas, Tannhauser and Lohengrin, and from then on, he was interested in Wagner's music style. Unfortunately for him, Richard's father was not a big fan of Wagner, and he hence forbade Richard from studying the music style. In addition to his formal teachers, Richard's journey into the discovery of music was greatly influenced by his father, Franz, who made sure that instrumental music making was first linked to the Strauss household. Franz taught his son the music of Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, and Haydn. He also assisted Richard with his composition by giving comments, advice, and constructive criticism of his works, all through the 1870s and into the early 1880s. He even helped him showcase his compositions of the Wild Gungel, an amateur orchestra which he conducted from 1875 to 1896. The compositions Richard made during this period were highly influenced by the styles of Robert Schumann and Felix Mendelssohn, all thanks to the teachings of his father. Richard Strauss would give his first performance in Vienna in the year 1882, where he played a piano reduction of the orchestral part of his violin concerto in D minor. Alongside him for the performance was Benno Walter, who played as the soloist. Turns out that this was the same year Richard went to study art history and philosophy at Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich. A year passed and he decided to leave the university to Berlin, where he studied for some time and then got a job afterwards as an assistant conductor to Hans von Bülow. All of this was because Bülow had been greatly impressed by the young composer's serenade for wind instruments, which Richard himself composed when he was only 16 years old. There is still so much to know about the journey of Richard Strauss. If you've enjoyed the video so far, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so you can find out more about some of the best composers in history. Young Richard closely observed Bülow's rehearsals, and through that he learned the art of conducting, and Bülow was impressed by Richard's brilliant mind. He then personally picked Richard to be his successor as the conductor of the Meiningen Orchestra in 1885 after he resigned. During his time as the conductor in the orchestra, Richard joined in the preparation of an orchestra premiere performance of Johann Brahms' Symphony No. 4, alongside Brahms, and also conducted Symphony No. 2 for Brahms. Richard's style began seeing changes and major developments in 1885, and this was the period he met a great co-composer, Alexander Ritter. At the time, Alexander was a violinist in the Meiningen Orchestra and was also dedicated to the ideals of Wagner and Franz Liszt. Strauss' works as a composer had Alexander's impact written all over them from 1885 onwards. Alexander managed to convince Strauss to quit his more traditional composing style and adopt the music of the future by representing his tonal style after Wagner and Liszt's. He influenced Strauss further by studying and engaging him in conversations about the works of Arthur Schopenhauer, Richard Wagner, and Friedrich von Hausiger. Strauss gained a new artistic core as a result of all of this, which was first seen when he embraced the tone poem genre. In 1886, Strauss left his position as the conductor at the Meiningen Orchestra and spent weeks touring Italy until he assumed the position of the third conductor at the Bavarian State Opera, which was then known as the Munich Hofoper. All through his journeys in Italy, he would journal the descriptions of various sights he saw and then create a tonal impression that he thought matched the descriptions. He communicated all of this in a letter he sent to his mother, and later on, they were used to start his first tone poem, Aus Italien, in 1886. For the next 3 years, Strauss would always meet with Alexander and was sometimes joined by Thull and Anton Seidl to debate music. Largely, Wagner and Liszt would sometimes include philosophy, literature, and poetry. Strauss did not enjoy his tenure at the Bavarian State Opera because after the death of Ludwig II of Bavaria in June 1886, the opera house lost its financial support. So all of the plans and ambitions he wanted to achieve in the opera house became too expensive to actualize. The assignments given to him bored him and made things worse. The senior conductor often fell ill, and Richard was made to fill in for him at every last minute. This became a problem for Richard and even the singers and the orchestra in general. Strauss would go out of Munich to conduct other works, and it was during that period that he met and befriended Gustav Mahler, a fellow composer, in 1887. Later on, in 1887, Richard would meet his future wife, Pauline de Anna, who was a first soprano at the Munich Musikschule and later began taking private lessons from Richard Strauss, who was her main teacher back then. The duo would move to Weimar, where they both got married, on the 10th of September, 1894. Pauline was outspoken and typically eccentric, but that was what drew Richard to her, and their marriage can be said to have been a happy one. His wife was a source of inspiration to him, and from his earliest songs to the final 4 songs of 1948, he took a liking to soprano and chose her to do the soprano parts in the songs. In Richard's first opera, called Guntram, which was held in Weimar, Pauline played the role of Freyhild. The performance got mixed reviews and ended up being hated and highly criticized after it was produced in Munich. This was noticed in history as Richard Strauss' first major failure. After the failure of his first opera in Weimar, no one would have ever thought that Richard's tenure in Weimar would bring him to the limelight and make him very popular in the music industry. Richard's tone poem, which premiered on the 11th of November 1889, got an excellent response and immediately brought him international recognition and success. That's not all, because after this, another huge achievement happened for Richard. This was the premiere of his tone poem, Death and Transfiguration, which was released in 1890. These 2 works of his became known worldwide and appreciated everywhere, as such bringing him the title of a leading modernist composer. In addition, he also made a huge success as a conductor in Weimar, especially with the symphonic poems of Liszt and an uncut production of Tristan and Isolde in 1892. By the time Richard's marriage was to be blessed with fruit, his wife birthed their only son and child, Franz. Richard thought of building the Strauss Villa when he purchased land at Garmisch-Partenkirchen. He then built his empire, where he resided with his family until his death at the age of 85 in 1949. Richard Strauss made popular and highly played music, as he always has been famous among various performers and audiences. His music is widely recognized by musicologists and considered an exquisite masterpiece. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe.